Hey guys, it's Jason Duff from Small Nation, and I am with Mindi Wells today. Mindi is the founder and managing attorney for Wells Law. She's been an attorney for 2 decades, and I've known her for most of those 2 decades because we had a chance to meet at Ohio Northern University, which we both are proud alums. So Mindi, it's great to have you and spend some time with you today. Mindi has also been an advisor to me in a number of HR capacity HR legal issues and matters for my business and for a number of businesses that we work with. Mindi, I also know we share a common background working in family business. So can you share a little bit about your family business background?
Sure. So I come from a background with a number of family members who own small businesses in and around Northwest Ohio. Many of them with little to no business training, certainly not college educated. And so my perspective in offering advice to the business clients I work with is what would I have hoped someone would have offered to them to help them be successful had they needed it? And how can I present that information in a way that is applicable, realistic, and that they can take that information and act upon it, make it useful to their business, not a whole lot of legal mumbo jumbo. So I think growing up with a lot of family members who did own businesses, they needed quick, to the point, actionable information, and that's what I try to give.
That's awesome. And I know that a lot of small businesses can't afford to have that HR person, let alone that HR department. And over the last 2 weeks, the information and the updates and just the things that are facing so many businesses right now are things we never could have planned for. So I imagine how are you kind of getting through that and managing that yourself and also with your business?
So a couple of things for me, because we work largely in an environment right now where we work remotely frequently. So the transition that our business is facing was not nearly as bumpy, or it wasn't an issue for us to be able to work remotely. We have all the technology and we're regularly set up to do that. But what we're seeing from our clients is that because they don't have HR people, they don't have crisis planning in place. They did not have pandemic planning in place. They don't have quick access to information at their fingertips. They don't have someone to write a brand new policy. They don't have someone to write an agreement. They don't know which laws are in play, which ones have been enacted, what's going on at the federal level, what's going on at the state level. Like, they just don't have the time or the resources on their team to stay abreast of all that themselves. And so where I think I can offer the greatest benefit right now is keeping on top of that for them. So I'm reading constantly, I'm watching webinars on the latest developments, tracking legislation, and I try to listen to all of that information and boil it down into a way that I think, how does this apply to the business owners that I work with? And how can I give them actionable tools or something useful out of all this information, boil it down and give them whatever they're going to need to roll this out in their business. So whether it's sample forms or documents or draft communications for their staff, what can I do based on what I am seeing that's happening, what's going into effect, having been in the HR chair myself, knowing the kinds of concerns that employees are going to have, how can I help get out in front of it for them and have those tools already ready to help them, so that they're less reactionary and less caught off guard, and they don't have to spend their own time trying to get educated and prepared. I can give them materials that are ready to launch.
That is so valuable, and thank you for doing so. I mean, I think what I have been experiencing is, as you know, the governor announced that a number of the businesses that we work with or tenants that we work with, we've been mandated closed. So, you know, it's like, first off, you're in shock, and then you're responding for the people that you care about, which are your employees or your tenants or associates. They're looking to you for advice, and a lot of this is just kind of uncharted territory. You know, what can you speak about right now if you said these are a few steps or a few things as your business is closed, as you're kind of contemplating, you know, can I keep people on my payroll? You know, do I have to furlough them or fire them? Can you speak to a little bit about those really important things and maybe some advice around that?
Yeah, so one of the things I've tried to talk to people about is, don't be in a rush. We have the time to make rational business decisions rather than reactionary emotional decisions. So what I've said to them is, there are deadlines associated with these laws. These laws don't require you to take quick action, but what you should do is take thoughtful business-based decisions. So get your paperwork in order, do a cash flow analysis, look at your contracts that you have established and projects in the pipeline, get a realistic picture of what the next couple of weeks and couple of months are going to look like. then I've put together some talking points on what kind of options are available to you. What does it mean to have a furlough? What does it mean to lay people off? What are reductions in forces? What are the consequences of each of those choices? So once the business has an understanding of their cash flow situation, what kind of volume of work they're going to have, we can then explore the different options of what to do with our staff. What can we afford to do? What, as an organization, do we feel comfortable with doing? What is our temperature for, or what can we stomach in doing with our staff? And then how have the laws changed and impact those decisions? For example, one of the top questions is, well, if we furlough or lay off or we reduce people's hours, do they qualify for unemployment? What happens to their health insurance? Can they get access to money in their 401k plan? Well, what's really interesting is all those answers that I would have had to those questions 3 weeks ago have all changed in the last week and days. We've had federal or state laws on every one of those topics in the last 2 weeks. And so for people who aren't reading and keeping up with all those, if you thought you knew the answer before, that answer is completely different today. And so it's a relevant question for people to stop and think I know what happens to unemployment if your hours are reduced, but you know what, I don't know if that's changed in law recently. So for example, here in Ohio, they've expanded the unemployment pretty significantly. So folks that do have reduced hours can qualify for unemployment. For people who lose their jobs entirely, obviously can qualify for unemployment. But even more importantly, there's options to keep their health insurance on that were different. A couple of weeks ago, your plan documents may have said someone needed to be a full-time employee to have health insurance or an active employee. The Ohio Department of Insurance put out an order that changed all of that. So what I like to do is talk to people about what's important to your business. What information do you need to make decisions that work for you and your team, whether it's reduction of hours, what are we doing with their health plan? Do they need to be able to get to a loan against their 401k or disbursement from their 401k? What's important to you? What information can I provide you so you can pick the right option for your staff and for your business? It's just a lot of moving parts, and it's a unique conversation to each business.
And you know, one thing that I know that a lot of small businesses either are or they're working with are 1099 vendors, so subcontractors. And you know, traditionally, a lot of these folks don't qualify for unemployment or some of the safety nets. But it seems like in this particular crisis situation, a lot of those folks are dealing with just as much of a serious situation as their W-2 counterparts. Can you speak to a little bit about how 1099 folks are impacted?
It's a great question. And for the longest time, it seems like a long time, the last 10 days, I've been telling people, hang on, self-employed folks, hang on, independent contractors. The current legislation, the current activity has really been focused on getting relief to workers and to businesses. And we hadn't seen a lot of action on the self-employed independent contractor relief or benefits. But that all changed recently in the CARES Act that's hopefully being passed yet today and signed into law, which specifically does provide relief to independent contractors, self-employed individuals. It expands the category of benefit or who's eligible for benefits beyond just regular workers, businesses that fit traditional definitions, and really gets into a lot of our gig economy and our independent contractor and self-employed folks. So taking note of the new CARES Act that's getting ready to go into effect should address some of those concerns. I've told people as independent contractors and self-employed, whether or not you think you qualify for unemployment, there's no harm in filing. And, they won't really know what the volume of need is out there until people file. So go ahead and file, and who knows what will be in place by the time they get the chance to review those applications. But certainly the financial relief is coming in the form of the CARES Act.
That's great. And I know you and I were talking, like a lot of the information that we're sharing to be the best of our knowledge. Like some of this information is coming and changing so fast, we can't even hold some of these things as facts. And then I think that we're also running into the issue that some of the federal laws are different from the state laws, and those things are trying to be reconciled right now. But thank you again for sharing that. So related to the governor has kind of shared and mandated that certain businesses are essential versus non-essential, and I know that there's a lot of misinformation, and even I can share here in our own county. The health department is really they're getting lots of phone calls about this. They're getting lots of questions because some employees are questioning their employer, or even some customers are frustrated that certain businesses are not closed. Do you have any advice from an employer standpoint that says, listen, like the way that I, read, these particular guidelines, I feel that I'm essential, and I've communicated that to my employees. Any kind of general advice about that?
Yeah, I think that there's kind of it's kind of a catch-22 for those businesses, because for many of those businesses, it's essential that they do operate, but the general public can't always see the essential nature of what they're providing. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions is not just if it's an essential business or operation, but if it's in the supply chain of an essential business or operation. So on the surface, you might look at that business and think, how could they be an essential business to our society or operations? But what we may not know as a general consumer is they're part of an important supply chain into a different essential business that's necessary to access them to keep their services going. And so for businesses, construction, and many of the other essential services that have been identified, there are plenty of businesses that are in the supply chain to keep those essential businesses going, and folks don't see that. I think there are two things that businesses can do to kind of help position themselves to respond to that criticism. One is by letting people know what an integral part they are of some supply chain, if they in fact are. And then two, even though they are open and operating, what options they've given their staff and all the precautions that they're taking. So the essential operations law that the Ohio Department, or the order that the Ohio Department of Health put out and said, essential businesses or operations are able to continue if they follow the social distancing requirements. Employers should take the opportunity to say, our health and safety of our staff is extremely important, and these are all the things we are doing to make sure you are healthy at work. Our employees are healthy, those we come in contact with, we close the door to the public, we're sanitizing, we're closing early to do this. Whatever it is that they're doing, that they can provide some peace of mind, because some people are afraid to come to work, and we need, but we also want them to feel confident in the safety measures that we're taking. And so that goes back to the issue of communicating with our staff what it is that we're actually doing. We're not staying open just to make a buck. It's not an act of greediness. It's generally because we're in a supply chain, and we want to generally continue to support the businesses that rely on us to get their business done. It's not about greed. It's not about putting people in jeopardy. We have a critical function to perform, and we are keeping our facility and our employees as safe as possible. We need to communicate that more effectively instead of just business as usual.
Are there any public posters or information that we need to be sharing or updating in our businesses today?
Good question. So there's a couple of posters that are, there's at least one that's required. So the Families First Response Act that came out has its own poster that was distributed earlier this week by the Department of Labor. It's a one-pager. It needs to be distributed to all employees on payroll. And so if there are folks who are working at home, it should be shared with them either electronically or an intranet or mailed. You can also post it where you post all of your general overtime and FMLA posters, other required posters. And then there are some posters produced by the CDC that are not required but are encouraged, that show the safety and hygiene that's being recommended. So the more visuals that you can create for staff, and the CDC has published quite a number of them, great resources for companies that are staying open on precautions to take, education, training, posters. But the one required one in particular is the Families First that contains the new paid leave laws. Got it.
We read this week that there's been record numbers of folks that have moved on to Ohio, unemployment here in Ohio. And I imagine those numbers are going to continue to increase. As we kind of look into the future, we just left an economy that was one of the strongest economies in probably 25 years, record unemployment. Businesses were really struggling to find amazing talent, and what advice do you kind of have as businesses are maybe rethinking about how people are working, who is essential, who is not essential, and then also maybe identifying new skills or new types of talent that they're going to need? How can you kind of speak to that and help maybe someone that's thinking about those HR activities when we come out of the fog?
It's a great time, although we're in an unprecedented time and what we're dealing with is very difficult. There's also an opportunity here to be very thoughtful and introspective about where we go next in determining, especially as we've had to downsize or perhaps scale differently on what's essential and who is essential. when we come out of this, determining what do we do with our workforce, where's our talent gap, what is the team we desire to have, it's a great opportunity to reflect on our organizational alignment and also identify the right talent that we want to have in the future. I think the talent pool is going to be quite generous to choose from. There's definitely going to be folks in the talent in the market that weren't available currently are going to come available when we come through all of this. So I think for companies that are that have the luxury of some time to really be introspective and intentional about what positions are going to be critical for us to maintain, where's our opportunity to maybe retool, redevelop some positions, reorganize, if there's opportunities to educate and retrain existing staff or go after a new talent pool that's not currently on our team that actually moves our organization ahead. One of the business owners I talked to recently who was really pretty upset about the whole situation. We had an extensive conversation, the time to sit and reflect, always just go, 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 barely keeping their heads above water. And when they finally had to put the brakes on everything, she realized that this is a perfect opportunity, kind of a not voluntary, but mandated time to stop and think and be intentional and look at where do we want to go in the future? What are the right positions that we're going to need to make us to help us move ahead in that direction? Where do we find that talent? Do we have it currently? Do we develop it in existing staff? Where would be the markets to go find those? Like all of those kinds of topics and thoughts that we all know we'd like to do, but we never have time to do them. This situation may give us that time to be really, really thoughtful and intentional in our development of our businesses in the future. But I think we really are going to be faced with an opportunity to have a generous talent pool to choose from. And I think people are going to take advantage of also, I forget what John Huston's comment was the other day about upgrading our skills during this time. And I think there will be people who take advantage of some of those opportunities to upskill themselves. And we might be really surprised at what's out there for us when we get through all of this.
Great point. And, for example, for my team, Yale is offering a free course right now on how to really identify, how to be happy. Online education is something that even in our companies at Small Nation, we want to help and expand and support small businesses all across the country. So, I said, if we're going to be offering those types of education, we need to be doing it and using it ourselves. Yeah. And so we're working through that process. And, I've been getting great feedback because this has been kind of a mental health game where those of us that are used to going into the office every day, creating, doing, like we're not able to do that the same way. So, but we need to continue. I was just finished up with a call that with a fitness facility owner, and he was just saying, like, listen, if you can just do one thing, like get up and have that accountability and do that one thing, that keeps you on that path versus just stopping altogether. Yeah. You mentioned that your team has been working from home or is capable to be virtual for some time. Can you kind of share for those businesses that maybe have not provided that permission or is not maybe as well equipped to have their employees working from home? Are there any kind of documents, procedures, things that you'd say these are kind of some things that are best practices to have in place?
There are some good practices in place, and honestly, one of the most common, sounds really common sense, is to say to your staff, if you had to do your key essential task or your key project from home, essentially a different chair, same job, just different chair, what you need to do it effectively, what elements of your job can you do remotely, and what can't you do? And of those things that you can do, what tools do you need to be able to do them? And so a lot of it is just having that conversation with your team members. And what I'm finding with many staff members is, although some of us think working from home is great, for some people, there's a fear of that, right? Working from home is not something they're used to. They may or may not love technology. And so the idea of just picking up and working from home the next day can really strike some fear. So I think talking with people, finding out what their comfort level is with teleworking, what tools they're going to need, what support they're going to need. And then as a leader and a manager, really thinking about how do you keep the momentum? How do you keep the engagement? You're going to have to be super intentional. We can't walk by their office or talk to them in the hallway or stop by their cubicle. We're going to have to create intentional points of contact throughout the day while they're teleworking. So it's a completely different, I think some people think it's super easy just to transition folks to telework, but for many staff members, whether it's a technology challenge or not having a colleague who often helps them resolve issues and not having that contact or that access to that person. So I think having some one-on-one conversations with staff about, we think we're going to approach this. What are you going to need? What are your concerns? What are going to be your biggest challenges? What are your distractions? What do you need from us to help you be successful? I've had some clients who employees, they don't want to telework. They want to come in the office. And I think letting them know that you want them to telework for their own safety, but you really want to have a serious conversation about how you can support them, how you can make the transition easier for them. Don't just assume everyone is looking forward to working from home. It's not an ideal situation for everybody.
That is great advice. And, I know a lot of our employees look to us in this situation to lead. And, just kind of maybe closing things, we're running out of time. You've just been sharing some really great nuggets, so thank you for that. But can we kind of leave on the topic of what can we be doing as leaders right now to best, prepare our companies and help lead in a time of uncertainty for our organizations?
I think the two biggest things that I have talked to leaders about is communication and compassion. So letting people know that you're actively monitoring what you're reading, what you're considering, what resources you're consulting, what options A, B, and C you're thinking about, perhaps how the impact is on the business. Don't assume that employees naturally know that this pandemic has this effect on the business, or that you have so many contracts that have been put on hold, or orders that have dried up, or employees don't see all of that. And you don't necessarily need to share all the information, but just letting them know the impact on the business and the variety of issues that you're considering and what your priorities are. If truly your goal is to keep people employed as long as possible, let them know that, but let them know what that you're balancing against and the factors you're taking into consideration. And then the second part is this issue of compassion. They have so much they're juggling right now. Employees are stressed in all aspects of their lives. So they're worried about their jobs, the jobs of their loved ones. They're worried about their own health and the health of their loved ones. They're worried about their children's schooling. They're worried about everyone being home at the same time and anyone being productive. They're worried about paychecks and benefits. They're worried about what's next. And so to the extent that we can not only be business leaders, but be very human in our approach and be compassionate with what all they are handling, letting them know if you have an employee assistance program, if your medical insurance offers telehealth, what do you have available to them that can help support them during this transition. And then knowing that after we get through all this physical sickness, there's a fair amount of after effect or aftershock that's going to happen, that we know there's still going to be more long-term mental health issues that come up after all of this is resolved as people adjust to what their new normal is economically. There might be deaths in their family. It's going to be significantly different once we get through all of this, and that compassion and the perspective of people are really carrying a lot on their shoulders is not going to stop once we just get through this pandemic. There's going to be some lag time there. So I think the communication and compassion are the two things as leaders we could really spend some time on, and it would be appreciated by the team.
Mindi, awesome interview today. Thank you so much. I know that this has been just a crazy time, and we are rounding out Friday evening right now. So I imagine you're excited to get home and rest a little bit and recharge before more information keeps coming in. But it really means a lot that you took the time to share such great advice today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Mindi.